Why is there such a contrast between my children when I'm parenting them the same? Should children be parented the same? After parents work with me, they no longer consider one child to be difficult and the other as easygoing. In this episode, give you, the parent, new insights on why your child might want to be the best or can't stand to be humiliated or possibly criticized, and does everything just so they won't be rejected. And you might even see behavior avoiding all kinds of stress altogether. My name is Annette, and I created this Effortless Parenting podcast because I believe that you deserve a calmer home. I guide parents to embrace boundaries with strong-willed and highly sensitive children so they still feel loved and can cherish a bond for life. Enjoy the show. Today's guest is Elaine Parker, and we'll speak a little bit about birth order and siblings and dynamics in families. So you're an Adlerian counsellor and a supervisor, and you were a school counsellor for over 8 years. So you've got loads of experience with children and young adults, and you'll be well informed in what we speak about today. And you work with couples and with families, and you give trainings in the Adlerian psychology trainings based in Wales. And in your former life, which I find so fascinating, I met you in person earlier last year, you're a musician. So that's what you went to university for. So to introduce yourself, maybe you can share where you're from and how you got interested in Alfred Adler, who all the teachings, the parenting and the teacher trainings we talk about on this channel are about. And then maybe one aspect, how his teachings have enriched your life.
Yes, thank you. Well, just a very brief introduction to me. I'm an eldest, as we're talking about birth order. I'm an eldest of 5. I was born in 1957. I'm really old. And when I was 5, we moved to France. I was born in Scotland. And when I was 5, we moved to France, and I stayed there until I was 16, then came back to the UK, Scotland, and then went to college in Cambridge. And then, was active as a musician, singing, teaching in Cambridge and London, and sang in a big choir in London. We travelled all over the world, which was wonderful. Then we moved to Wales. And when I moved to Wales, I'd already done a couple of psychology trainings. And I thought, really, we knew nobody when we moved here. So I thought one good way to get to know people would be to maybe do a counselling course. So I looked in the paper in the January. We moved in December. In January, free counselling course. So free for people. It was 10-week introduction. So I enrolled in that, and it was wonderful because the trainer was Linda Edwards, who is an Adlerian and trained in London with people like Zonstergaard. And she was just an amazingly inspiring teacher. And the course was not fully Adlerian. There were only 2 evenings on Adler. But as soon as I heard about Adler, it just blew me away. It explained everything. About my family dynamics, about being an eldest, and my personality and my temperament. All of those things became so clear in those 2 evenings. And immediately I just thought, this is it. I've come home. I've come home. This is the psychology that means a lot to me. So I signed up to do the certificate, which started in September 2004. And that was the start of my training. So I qualified in 2008, having done 3 years with a gap in between, and never looked back. Absolutely love Adler. I've come to believe I've become more Adlerian as I go on. His ideas seem to be very simple, but they are deep. And there are layers and layers and layers and layers. And I've had so many amazing Adlerian colleagues who've taught and inspired me. And also I early on, because I had a lot of teaching experiences, I started teaching Adler at a basic level, and now I'm teaching at supervision level. And so I feel as though I'm kind of maturing as an Adlerian, getting there.
Right.
So that's really in a nutshell what it
And
is.
what is something like when you say I have come home, when I heard about Adler, I had that same feeling. I started with Rudolf Dreikers, who was a junior colleague. He explained Adler to me in a way of how we can adapt that to parenting, and he's done a lot of marriage counseling. When you say you've come home to Adler, what is one thing that you say, wow, I couldn't live without this, knowing this anymore, or
Yes. Well, I think actually it's understanding the formation of personality in that early childhood. Adler said that we have everything in place in terms of our personality by the age of 5. Dreiker said by the age of 7. So 5 to 7, I think, is useful. And there are so many aspects to this that were meaningful to me. So the birth order, very important, and the relationship between the different siblings, and also the parenting styles, what our parents were like, and how they brought us up and how they educated us to be part of a family, all of those, how they modeled being a parent, what was useful, what was less useful, understanding how those dynamics impacted on me and the choices I made. And I think also understanding that we create ourselves, that it's not cause and effect. Children look around and they make decisions based on not always the full experience, but that they have feelings and they make a decision based on their experience currently and their feelings and what they might do about it. So that really helped me understand, and also understand how different all 5 of us are, my siblings and me. We are so different one from the other. And that always puzzled me. And of course, Adler gave the explanation for that.
And I want to dive into that with my first question. That's a lovely transition. And, so when parents come to me, so I work as a parent educator, and when parents come to me, they sit in front of me and often in despair say, I'm parenting my children all the same and they're so different. What am I doing wrong, or what can I do differently, So I would love to hear a bit more about that, which you were already starting to explain, Elaine.
Well, yes, I think there are certain things that are foundations that are the same. So, for example, the kind of the discipline within a family, the rules, what we are allowed to do, what we're not allowed to do, how we respect each other, all of those things. But also understanding that our children will be different from each other and will have different psychological and emotional needs. So it's not about preferring one over the other, or being softer with one or softer with the other, but children have different personalities. They're not little cookie cutter children, like those garlands you see when you cut out the shape of children. They're not like that. They're not all the same. And I think also building strong relationships with each child individually as well. Giving children love as well as discipline. And when we say discipline, positive discipline, as you know, is about really, it's about encouragement. It's about understanding consequences of behaviour. It's not harsh. It's not physical hitting, or so that the concept of discipline, of the word disciple, discipline is about being a follower, about living to the certain rules. So it's not about wagging finger and you must only do this or not that. So it's just really about relationship, I think. And also that sorry, I was just going to say that parents, what is, I think, really helpful to parents is to understand that children watch them, children observe.
Yes.
And the parents can model being a parent, being a woman, being a man, or any other, so you might have families with 2 mums or families with 2 dads. So what is being modeled to the children? What are we learning? Children watch what we do and they know how they feel about what we do. So I think recognizing that is really, so there's parents have a responsibility to be a good role model.
Right. So Elaine, they watch everything we do. And then, and especially parents of maybe 1, 2, or more children than 2, they might start hearing things from parents where they say, oh, you love the other more than me, and what you just mentioned reminded me of something I heard Rudolf Dreikurs say. It's not so much about what what the parent believes about how much they love the child or what they feel. So I'd love to hear more from you, about how those beliefs are formed and what parents can learn there.
Well, yes, I think the one of the things that Adler really showed us is exactly how the beliefs are formed. Mm-hmm. So when we work with, for example, early recollections, so a child observes, so children can come to different conclusions in the same situation. So each child's perception, each child's understanding is equally valid. Mm-hmm. So that's the child's own, what we call private logic, your own understanding of what's going on around you. Mm-hmm. And those are formed really by initially by trial and error, So the child might feel, so for example, say a child is on its own in a cot, a little child, 1.5 years old, is on its own and it feels lonely, or maybe it's got a sore tummy, or maybe it's got a wet nappy, and it cries because it needs somebody to come. Well, if somebody comes quickly, the child will maybe think, okay, that's the way to go about things. Mm. I know that if I cry, somebody will come quickly, and if they come quickly and kindly, then I get my needs met and it's all fine. If that same child or another child in the same position cries and nobody comes, mm-hmm. and it's left there sitting with a wet nappy or sitting in a bit of pain, because there was a school of thought a long time ago that if a child cried, you ignored it, you just let it cry until it cried itself out. Well, yeah. What conclusion does that child come to about other people, about themselves? They might think, oh, I'm not worth responding to, nobody cares about me, or people hate me, or I am alone in the world.
To fight for my own, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Life is really unfair, or life is harsh. Therefore, I must just get on with it by myself. So these beliefs begin to be formed quite early on, and by trial and error, and also depending on the response of those around them. So it's a really interesting thing to observe. I don't want to say too much about early memories, but they are the birth order aspect is also really crucial in how a child perceives the world.
And maybe we can do a whole other session on early memories if the parents who watch us is interested. Do you know what? I had another thought there from a parent's point of view. So we know that from infancy, the day the child is born, they observe everything, like you said. I don't want to repeat what you already said. Isn't it the hardest thing for parents when a child can't really verbally express that yet? So therefore, parents may believe, oh, sure, it doesn't really matter what I do, or not that the parent thinks that, but it's so hard, isn't it? That if the 2-year-old could only communicate that rather than having a tantrum or whatever we say, that those beliefs are being formed. Well,
Well, yes, and again, there is a belief. Maybe not so much now, because I think some parenting has changed massively certainly in my lifetime. But there was a French saying, "Pas devant les enfants," which means not in front of the children.
Right. Yeah. Uh-huh.
So, meaning that the children will know nothing about the atmosphere between the two parents. But children, even although they can't verbalize it, they can feel. They feel the atmosphere. They understand what's going on. So for example, if two parents, they're not having an argument, but they're not speaking, and there's a frosty atmosphere, the child knows.
Yes.
So I think we must never assume that the child cannot understand. They understand probably firstly at a feeling level.
Right.
Even if they can't think about about things intellectually yet, because they're not fully formed. They're not fully formed until they're 21 or something. So, it takes time. But there's early really crucial. A lot of parents assume that their children don't pick things up, but they do. They do. They observe, yes, but they feel, and they come to conclusions, and sometimes not the most logical conclusion from an adult perspective, but from a child perspective, that works. Like the child crying, the purpose of the crying, and what happens when they cry, how people respond. So the early dynamics are really, really important, actually.
Yeah. And I always think of that example, let's say you're firstborn or you're a second child and a younger one comes along, and then the child observes, oh, this newborn gets so much attention, right? And then parents say that their older child falls back into more babyish behavior because they come to that conclusion that I will get attention, right? Or to get love here, I need attention.
Again, there are many, many different responses to that younger child arriving. So some eldest might feel dethroned. That's a word that we know and use a lot. They might feel, well, hang on, the spotlight's been on me all this time, and suddenly somebody else is more important than me. So what am I going to do about that? What do I, as that firstborn, do? So there might be several different responses. One, yes, might be, I'm going to be like a baby too, because if I'm like a baby, I'll get that attention. Another one might be, I'm going to really help my mummy, because if I'm a good girl or good boy, I will get good attention. Another one might be, I'm going to just do my thing. I'm going to ignore everyone and basically tell them all to get lost. So there are as many different responses as there are children.
Right.
We cannot say this will always happen or that will always happen.
Yeah.
Adler himself said, and things can always be different.
And I love that. So it moves as well. And then, Elaine, before I go into my next question, there's so many questions in between, but this whole good girl, and especially mothers who I work with, that belief can be formed in the first few years. I need to be the good girl in order to belong, which is this big theme with Adler and Drykhurst. I need to belong here. And then maybe you can say a little bit from your wisdom and experience on how then that belief is taken into adult life and never really questions until maybe we go into therapy or something big happens. And it's this underlying thing that we're not aware of. Yeah.
Well, exactly. And I think what happens, people tend to come to therapy when their early strategies stop working.
Okay.
That's when they think, hang on, there's something not working here. This is not helping me. I need to find a different way. So I need to apply an adult perspective rather than a child perspective onto my way of managing life. So that's when I see people come to therapy. This doesn't work anymore. So there's so much theory. I'm just trying to think about what would be useful here. So we learn those tendencies early. So there's an Adlerian called Nira Kfir, who was based in Israel. She did a lot of work on what she calls the priorities of lifestyle. So priority behaviors. So these are the go-to behaviors. So when we are confronted with an impasse, in her words, when we hit a brick wall or we go down a one-way street and we can't go any further, that's the impasse. She has formulated this idea of there are what she sees as 4 priority behaviors. And these behaviors will be fed by our early understanding, by our early personality formation, if you like. So she sees one as the first one is superiority. Superiority. So that comes from the belief that I must be better than everyone else. There's a certain amount of perfectionism possibly in there, but I must be better. I must overdo. I must overwork. I must push myself. And what the impasse with that is meaninglessness. So, well, if I'm not the best, there's no point. I'm meaningless. I feel meaningless. Life feels meaningless. So that's the first one. Another response from a child is that I must avoid humiliation. So when I work with adults and children, very often some of the early memories might have humiliation. For example, in a classroom when you were 5, having a pee, peeing in your pants, the humiliation of that, of everybody else, and, you know, really awful. And you might have been told off by the teacher, you know, all of those kinds of things. So the impasse is humiliation. In order to avoid humiliation, I must be really in control.
That's right. That's my one. I'm very familiar with that one.
I know that one well. So I must be in control, because the alternate, if I'm not in control, I can be humiliated and feel really bad. Yeah. The third one that she developed was the impasse was rejection. If I'm rejected, I can't live. It's really difficult. And so what I must do is please everyone in order to avoid rejection. So sometimes a firstborn might go into rejection, fear rejection, because there's the other one over there. The spotlight's moved. So, oh, what about me? So therefore I will become mummy's little helper. I will please. And that becomes a strategy. Then the final one that Nira Kfir kind of alluded to was avoidance. She called it avoidance, and some people add comfort seeking. So that is complete discouragement. I can't do any of this. It's all too stressful. At all costs, I must avoid stress. Okay, so stress is too much. I don't feel up to it. I'm not strong enough. I don't have the skills. And so the stress is the impasse for that. I must avoid stress at all costs by staying comfortable, by never engaging with life, by, you know, maybe sleeping a lot, sometimes addiction, sometimes alcohol. You know, it's really fascinating. So those are dynamics that she's observed. Okay. And we all can do all of those things, but there is always one main one, and that's why she called it priority. That's our first go-to. So it's just fascinating, and to see how that links with the early recollections as well. It's really interesting.
Absolutely, and I thank you so much for mentioning this in positive discipline, and you're familiar with that as well. I might link, there's a book that she wrote, right? I might link that in the description below. We have like these parcels, you know, 4 parcels, and we say, imagine like the delivery guy brings them, and then it has these 4 words on it, you know, the superiority, humiliation, rejection, and avoidance, and which is the one that you would not want to deal with at all. And that gives us a good indication where we go to when we're stressed. And we don't say that this is any kind of labeling, but it really opens parents it kind of gives them an idea about their own coping mechanisms and strategies, right? It's highly interesting, and
it's I find it incredibly useful, and it's what was the word? I was going to say trigger, but it's not really but it is. It feels like a trigger. It's a very quick flash of something that comes up when we feel when we hit our impasse.
Yeah.
So it's very strong, very, very strong. And actually, I don't think it ever really goes away.
That's what the perfectionists want to hear, right?
We become aware of it, and we might be able to slow it down and develop some strategies and encourage ourselves in a different path. But the impasse never goes away.
Yeah. And I don't know how you explain it, Elaine. Maybe you can elaborate. How we do it is that it comes with not only kind of the more liability side, but it also has assets, right? So somebody who like you say, goes for that control thinks mistakenly that this is the way to cope. Our kind of box, let's say it, if we say it that way, is that it brings also the strength of maybe being very organized or wanting to just really everyone to contribute, and having those kind of skills as well.
Yeah. Absolutely. They all have assets. They all have positive sides to the behaviors. So, for example, for superiority, it can be a good leader. It can be someone who really wants to explore meaning and to bring meaning to things. They can be very, able to bring others in as well, to help others cooperate. For control, yes, very organized, good business people, really, really helpful to be, they dot the I's and cross the T's, and then for the pleasing, well, to be someone to please you is such a lovely thing, for someone to do something kind for you. It's all of these behaviors, it's when we exaggerate them, it's when we do them too much that they become problematic. And the same with avoidance and comfort. They can be the homemakers. They can be people who really understand that other people need comfort too. I've got loads of examples I can give of relationships between my own superiority and people with different, which I won't go into now because it can go on forever. But, there's something, the other thing to think of is in relationship. So, for example, in a couple or in a parental relationship, what are the priorities? How do they work together? How do they work against each other? So, and so again, I've had lots of relationships, working relationships that have gone well with people of different priorities, and also with clients. If mine is superiority, my go-to is to create meaning and to all of that, but also to be the best I can be. There was a time when I had to be better than others, and if I wasn't, I was absolutely devastated. So learning to manage that one. But, if my client is pleasing, really wants to please me, they might always say yes to what I might formulate and say, oh, I'm wondering if that could be the case. And they might always say yes, even if it's not, because they want me to approve of them, and they don't want to contradict me, or they don't want to say, no, that's not it. So if a client is using control priority, they might wrestle with me and say, no, you haven't got it. No, that's not me at all. And in my gut, I know it is, but they won't let go of that. And it's the same with avoidance. Interestingly enough, I don't see as many avoidant clients as I do of the others.
That brings me to a question that I just thought of. Now that you've heard how your child might have come to form a belief about themselves, I highly recommend watching this next video, which I leave right here in the corner, how your own birth order determines your life and how it impacts how you parent your eldest, your middle, your youngest, or your only child. Thank you for watching.